Hello, this is John Majori with Majori on Bowie, and this is the Majori on Bowie YouTube channel, where I have a new interview every week that always has something to do with David Bowie. And for daily content, visit the blog, www.majorionbowie.com, where I have new content every day that almost always has something to do with David Bowie. While you're here, please like and subscribe. You'll get a new interview video every single week. Today, I'm on location in Boston, Massachusetts with Gretchen Shae, a return guest. Gretchen is an associate professor of literature at the Berklee College of Music, one of the premier music institutions in the United States, where she teaches a course on David Bowie. And when she was last on my show, that was the topic of our conversation. And I wanted to have her back to talk about Diamond Dogs. Now, Gretchen is not just a professor, but she's also a rock star. She is the lead singer in two different bands, Gretchen and the Banshees, which is a Siouxsie and the Banshees cover band, and We Are Proles, the name of which shares a common DNA with Bowie's Diamond Dogs. And not to drag out the suspense, but that common DNA has to do with 1984. We'll be talking about that today as well. Gretchen, welcome back.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. Lovely to chat with you again.
Yeah, it's great to do it in person.
Exactly. Yeah. Instead of the Zoom, yeah. Which is very 1984, the Zoom method, right?
It is. And, I think I'm going to ask you a question related to that.
All right.
So, I want to get into Diamond Dogs and I want to get into 1984. Related to that, and when we set up this interview, I didn't know that this was in the works, but you are involved with a 1984 project. What is that?
Sure. So over the last 2.5 years, I have been working on a labor of love, which is taking Orwell's 1984, which happens to be in the public domain, thank you, and Bowie's Diamond Dogs, which, as many of your viewers, listeners will know, was originally Bowie's musical answer to 1984. However, Orwell's second wife, whom he wasn't married to for too long because he expired, said, no, you freak, something to that effect. You will not touch my husband's elegiac prose. And so Bowie turned around and, wrote this amazing album, which if you do a deep dive and examine the lyrics, I will say that much of it, not just, the surface like Big Brother 1984, you really get into the lyrics and you can see that they are directly related to the text, themes of the text. We Are the Dead. I mean, I can go on and on. So I feel like he wrote this musical anyway, just not calling it 1984. Yeah. And he tried to bring that to the stage with, the setting that he had of Hunger City.
When he was touring the album, which is not recorded on film.
Which is not recorded on film. And as you know from speaking with, your guest, Earl Slick, there really isn't a ton of footage of that period. It's crazy. And, hearing the stories of the construction of that stage in Hunger City, part of that, ended up in a swamp in Florida, right?
Yeah. So wait a minute, Gretchen, just on the off chance that somebody's watching a Bowie show and doesn't know who Earl Slick is.
Yes.
Who's Earl Slick?
Oh, sure. So Earl Slick is one of the last remaining original band members. And as fate would have it here, toured this album, toured Diamond Dogs, and, just I think added so much to it, to its spirit. And Earl toured with Bowie 5 times throughout his life, and is such a brilliant musician and collaborator in his own right, and just an amazing human to get to speak with, as you know, with great stories and just a lust for life,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So it's interesting. You said something that I also think, but I don't think everybody does. That it's not just the three songs that have direct references to 1984 that are influenced by 1984. So after we spoke before, that inspired me to reread the novel.
Great.
So it's fresh in my mind, and it became more apparent to me that the rest of the album is also related to 1984. And I'm interested in your thoughts about the songs that are not obviously related to 1984. How are they influenced?
Sure. So I think one of the most listener, viewer friendly examples would be Rebel Rebel. Because everyone knows that song, whether they're huge Bowie fans or not. And unfortunately, as they say, when you pluck it from the tree and it stands alone, yes, it does great things. And it's become such an anthem for, just saying, gender constructs are ridiculous. Let's totally just dismantle that idea. Be yourself, be an individual. But in the context of the novel, and if you're listening to the album with the idea of a theatrical production in mind, to me, it is, Julia's song. And one of the exercises that I do with my students in music and meaning in the works of Bowie is, while we're reading the novel, we look at the songs, and in small groups, I have them, isolate the lyrics. And I say, how does this fit in to the novel? What is like Rebel Rebel's, meaning in terms of, the story, the narrative that is here. And if you think about it, right, she's a member of the Anti-Sex League, right? But yet, of course, she manages to, have this power over Winston, which is like quite remarkable, because he, I think, is keeping things internal for so long, and he's sort of he's like pushed to get out of that, the mindset, the fear, because he is a character that has great fear, right? And will he act on that fear, right? And so I think Julia is the rebel, you know what I mean?
The word, I'm telling you, after I reread the book, last time I read it might have been in 1984. I'm not even joking, right? But I always thought of it as one of my favorite novels, even though I hadn't read it for years.
Yeah.
And it's sort of funny what you retain and what you forget. But there's that word in the book, rebel, is associated with her, right? I mean, it's used in describing her. Yeah.
And I had, a real challenge in a way. My goal, of course, being one who teaches literature, was to not only preserve the authenticity of the novel, but as well as that, balance, handle how I interpret Bowie's attempts to do so as well. So that was really a balance for me. And looking at the dialogue in the script, when the world gets to see and hear it.
So wait a minute. I cut you off.
Yeah, that's okay.
Explain
that's okay.
The script. So what is the script of what?
Sure, yeah. So as one of
I'm
my...
so excited. I'm just
it's exciting. So my professional development project at Berklee involved, me coming up with something that I felt, really demonstrated what I do in the classroom. And, for years, I've been thinking, like, because Boston Conservatory merged with Berklee, we have this great ability to combine music, dance, acting, there's all of the arts now. There's no art that is left unrepresented at Berklee. And so I thought, here we are with all of these performing arts students, musicians in a classroom that are taking liberal arts courses. How can we show them the value of, the deep reading. And so when I designed my course that we spoke about last January, oh my God, almost coming up on a year ago. Wow, time flies, so much has happened. I, thought to myself, well, it's time for me to practice what I preach with them. And so I took Orwell's novel and Diamond Dogs, and I wrote the musical that I believe Bowie may have. And I'm going to be very, very careful because, again, I always laugh. There's this interview that I'm sure you've seen and many of your viewers have seen, where an interviewer is asking him about lyrics and what they mean. And he laughs and he says, only as he can laugh, and he says, oh, the Americans are going to make much of this, but it doesn't mean anything. And so I always laugh and argue with him in my mind, because I think, like, well, you may say it doesn't mean anything, but I believe, everything has meaning, whether it's conscious or subconscious,
Yeah, I find that myself being a principal example, fans are really interested in the lyrics. And when I've talked to musicians who played with Bowie, they downplay the significance of the lyrics. And I think he had something in mind, and he just doesn't want to tell us how to interpret, right? Because he was like the least reliable interpreter of his own music. But the one thread that he carried, from the early days into the late days, was he really encouraged the audience to bring their own meaning to his work and to art in general. So we're going to speculate a little bit, right?
We're going to speculate. Yeah.
What do you think his interest was? Like, what was he going for? Why did he want to do a musical about 1984?
I think just knowing, and again, I know you've had on the two podcast, would you call them podcast creators who did, they read 100 books.
Yes.
I loved listening to that. Shout out to that.
The
That
Bowie
was
Book Club. Yeah,
that was really, really, really
I'm
cool.
hoping to have them back too. So.
That was really, really cool. And I have not read all 100. I want to be really clear about that, because I only have so much time with the students, and I find it's really difficult balancing. I'm balancing the texts, the songs, the performances, the live versions. I mean, it's a lot. You know what I mean? But one of the things that, again, I'm speculating. This is all pure speculation. My theatrical musical brain, when writing this, really arrived at is, we know that Bowie developed all of these characters, right? And one of them that he developed specifically for this is Halloween Jack. And I'm sure for our viewers and listeners, I let John have a little sneak peek of the script. And one of the things that struck me was that I had to insert Bowie into his own musical. And so for 1984, Halloween Jack is the, all-knowing, omniscient narrator who is directly looking at times, the audience, and joking with them, and kind of releasing some of the tension, because it's a very intense story, right?
Yeah.
So, and I won't give any other spoilers, but, I have him at one point, and it is comical in a sense, which some people might be like, 1984 is anything but comical, but in great drama, right? Shakespeare always relieved the tension, right? So I have Halloween Jack, who I think was Bowie, right? Slide out from under the bed and say to the audience, or will they? He does like a little aside, like he knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so because Bowie was the creator and the master of this album, I felt in order to honor him, I had to put him into the script. And so he is the only, character who knows what's going to happen. And so he has that connection with the audience.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much I want to ask you. So, so, so let me ask you this. I'm thinking about that image, and so
yeah.
So there's 1984 covers some themes that Bowie would cover before Diamond Dogs and after Diamond Dogs, and I wanted to sort of touch on some of those themes.
Yeah.
So, especially in the early 70s, while he is experiencing stardom in a way that he hadn't in the 60s, he would conflate being a rock star with a demagogue, with a religious figure. And if you think about the song, his song, Big Brother, what, like the song, like what is the song about? What's the refrain of the song? And how
someone to save us, some great Apollo.
Yeah.
Right?
And the chorus is what?
We want you.
We want you.
We
Big
want
Brother.
to worship something.
Yeah.
Right? And so, you bring up a great point. I'm going to piggyback that song with We Are the Dead.
Yeah.
Right? Because, that is direct dialogue from the text.
Right.
And of course, a song in Diamond Dogs. And so I think this concept, as you said, Bowie kills Ziggy.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And he goes on to kill or put away for a while, if you will, all of his characters. If you think about it, I'm going to go all the way to the 90s, right? He said in the Changes tour, I'm not doing these songs ever again. He lied, right?
Yeah.
So I think this idea of building up and creating this super, like you said, presence, this God that people can worship and adore. Once that God gets too high, right? The old, Icarus, right?
Yeah.
We have to crash him and burn him. And then what will he become, right? Like, I think that idea is, as you said, just a reoccurring theme, being aware of your mortality. So if you get too close to the sun, right? If you are, too deep in it, he even said that, like, Ziggy, and then he said that following that, if we go to the Thin White Duke could have killed him. Right?
Yeah.
So what does he do? He kills the Thin White Duke. Right?
So you're mentioning these are characters,
right?
Like Thin White Duke, Ziggy, Howling Jack. They're all characters.
Yeah.
Big Brother. I'm struck in the book.
That
Winston asks the main antagonist, O'Brien, is Big Brother even real? And O'Brien says he's as real as you and I are. Right?
Exactly. Because people will create. And again, here we are in 2025.
Yeah.
What a time to be talking about this, because we live in a time where things that are not real, it doesn't even matter, because something is said on social media, as an example. And if enough people retell that, it does become real.
Yeah. There's another, I won't remember the exact line, but O'Brien says, I could fly if I want to. And he's not talking about actually flying, but he's talking about the, he who controls the past controls the present, right? And it's, so within the authoritarian, totalitarian society of 1984, the government, the party, INSOC, is really concerned with changing the way history is recorded and changing the language itself. And why?
Well, again, pardon me, John, because I can't help myself. Here we are in 2025, and what has been squashed? Diversity and inclusion. It doesn't exist. Well, for some of us, it very much exists, but there are certain places that have, buckled and dismantled the title of diversity and inclusion, right?
Changing the language.
It's just like the novel, isn't it?
Yes.
We're going to just cover those words up. We're going to remove them, whether it's a text or a website. It's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Or, going back to the novel, like Winston, the protagonist's job is to change archived newspapers and historical references so that the past is remembered differently than it actually happened.
Again,
Yeah.
2025.
So was Bowie playing with those concepts, with his own characters, with his own personalities, with his own, like, who's the real David Bowie?
Right. I think he would with each new character, each new album, I think he was the master of, but look at this.
Yeah.
And, let's not look at that. Let's look at this. I mean, again, like when I think of Golden Years, you think of that song, it's so different from Queen Bitch, right? Like, he really, truly reinvented and started from the bottom, right? With this rebuilding, if you will. And isn't that what great artists do? Yeah. Right?
I had, talking about collaborators, I had Donnie McCaslin on my show.
Oh, I've wanted him to come to Berklee. Yes, yeah.
That's a Berklee connection. But he said when Bowie, so Donnie McCaslin's a jazz musician. Yeah. Bowie met him and asked him to actually get a band together for what would become Black Star. And Bowie said, "Are you familiar with my work?" And Donnie McCaslin said, "Well, of course, I know you, but I'm not. I should go and listen to your back catalog." He said, "No, don't do that." Right. So it's like he's erasing history and creating a completely new identity.
Yep. And it's interesting that you say that, because the last character, which again, when we attribute a character to that album, it's referred to as the blind prophet.
Yes.
Which is really interesting, right?
Well, why is it interesting, right? Because it is. Yeah. Where does the blind prophet come back?
Yeah. I mean, I and again, pure speculation on my part. I know what I believe to be true is he was looking ahead.
Yeah.
After his death, he was looking ahead beyond existence.
Yeah.
And saying, again, looking at the song Black Star, and I know we're here to talk about Diamond Dogs, but, he says something happened on the day he died, a spirit rose, right? So he's saying, like, I always think of that song as, like, I'm a black star, like, who is the next person who will replace me? Yeah. Right? Who's rising up? Who's the next someone to save us, someone to follow? There, we can balance all three songs in here, right?
It's like he's suggesting that the character that we have all experienced as David Bowie is itself replaceable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and again, I feel as though a lot of his thinking was so rooted in the classics.
Yes.
It's really like, who writes their own death? Who does that? Well, David Bowie did.
Yeah.
He did. And he was thinking beyond his death, even so, right? And that is the greatest achievement of immortality right there.
The last time we talked on the show, you had mentioned that David Bowie was, his quest was for immortality, right?
That's one of the huge themes we talk about, in my class.
In your class. So just as a point of reference, you use three main books.
Yeah. So we look at the Iliad.
Yeah.
And then we move into Dante's Inferno, and then we end with 1984.
Yeah.
And it's a lot, but the reoccurring theme amongst all three of them really is of course, in 1984, it's more about death itself. But in the Inferno and the Iliad in particular, it's the achievement of immortality.
Yeah.
Right? Because, Achilles rather, die a death that is heroic, right? Than to die, doing something that he doesn't want to do because it's what he wants to do. He rather have this like honoring and tradition and respect for the gods. To die in battle with glory, right, is to achieve immortality because you died for the honor. right?
Yeah.
And then in the Inferno, we're looking at, again, there's Dante moving through all of these circles of hell, right? And it's not so much Dante, which of course it is, because there he wrote this beautiful poem that is remembered, and he did achieve immortality. But a lot of the figures in the Inferno, as you know, are politicians,
Yes.
right? Philosophers,
Yeah.
and they want to be remembered. And they keep saying, like, does anyone, I'm putting this in plain English, not in the beautiful language that it was written in, but they keep asking him, am I remembered? Am I spoken of?
Yeah.
Like, that's all a lot of them care about, right?
And is that supposed to demonstrate the sin of pride in the Inferno?
In the Inferno, I mean, again, pride, moves through all three as well.
Yeah.
And that's not something that I've ever spoken about, really,
Okay.
but I can understand that.
Yeah.
Because I think when we're thinking of like pride in the classical sense, as you know, we think about like making decisions, making movements that we care more about how others will see,
yes.
and than what necessarily is right, and that can be the biggest sin of all. Right?
The reason I'm asking that, and in my mind at least, it actually does relate back to Diamond Dogs, is it seemed like Bowie was conscious of the 7 deadly sins. And I connect the song Big Brother relatively recently with what I thought was the oddball song on the album, which is When You Rock and Roll With Me.
Ooh, yeah.
But actually, I had another guest who wrote a book about Diamond Dogs, a professor named Glenn Hendler. And he found an interview that I had never seen before where Bowie was talking about that song being the song on the album that most had to do with fascism. And it doesn't seem that way. But he's referring to the tens of thousands. What is the line? He's describing the relationship between the audience and the rock star, which he conflates with the relationship between the audience and the demagogue, right? Like the Hitler figure or the Big Brother figure, right?
Yeah.
And I also think about another song, which is not from Diamond Dogs, but is from Young Americans, which is Somebody Up There Likes Me, which sounds like this beautiful song that whatever it's about, you don't even think what it's about, but you look at the lyrics, and it's a superficial politician who presents himself as being like the gift from God, and he's very egotistical, and it's all about him, and right.
I'm going to throw into that canon Station to Station.
Yes.
The Return of the Thin White Duke.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, throwing darts in lovers' eyes. Right. Again. When we get to the second movement in that song, I mean, because that song is a monster. I love it so much. It's so complex. But what does he say? The European canon is here.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it really boils down to, this idea of people are looking for someone to follow, someone to save us or them, right?
Yeah.
So it's the power of language and the power of charisma, right?
So the power of language. Let's talk about that. Because,
sure.
I don't. We've got a copy of the book here.
We do. We have a copy. To show the madness, the method behind the madness.
Yeah, I'm really interested in what you have tagged. So let me ask you these 2 questions. One is about language. To me, again, having reread the book within the last few months.
Yeah. Good.
Two things stood out on the language point. The centrality of changing the language, right? So within this totalitarian culture, there is a concerted attempt to create what's called newspeak, right? Which uses fewer words, right? And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And What is that like? What is that reason?
Well, I would say the reason is because the more I limit you, the less you will challenge me.
Yeah.
Right? The more, and it's interesting because I've had this conversation with one of our aforementioned greats, and just talking about the dumbing down of society, and again, it is 2025. Reminder to our, which I'm sure most of our listeners and viewers, already think about this. But the more funding that is taken away from the arts,
yes,
which, as you know, I'm sure, there's been a lot of funding that's been taken from the arts, the more it prevents new development, right?
Yeah.
And so if I limit what I can control you.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
And with Newspeak, that's completely what they were doing to that society, right? Yeah. Making you can't question anything, you can't challenge anything if you're ignorant.
Right.
Right? Because you're only fed.
If you can't even formulate the thoughts, because we think in terms of language. If you can't formulate the thought of resistance or revolution, or then the idea was that the masses, the people, would be more passive.
Right, and that's how the whole novel really begins. Right, is Winston questioning things.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And how does he question things? He writes.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'll give one more spoiler. So I had to obviously take a novel, and to be able to tell the story with the music and have it not be 3 hours long, I had to push the action and make the action move a lot quicker than it does in the novel. And so I had to strategize, how was I going to get Julia and Winston to be alone, right? Quickly.
Yeah.
And so what I did, this is one liberty that I had to take in order to make it work, is that I wrote a scene where originally Winston does going to Charrington's to, look at, objects and things.
Like a gift store.
Yeah. So, of course, it has very little, right?
Yes.
It's all antiques, right? So what I did was I had Julia also go in. And the first thing that she says, why is she there? Because she wants a journal, because you cannot find notebooks. They don't exist. So I created that so that was their connection. You know what I mean? That she's going in there because she wants something to write down her ideas, which is a no-no. Right. You know what I mean? Yes. And he's in there as well. Yeah. And so they can connect, on that level. So that's something that I wrote in that doesn't exist in the novel, but I had to speed up the interaction.
Well, that's,
Yeah. And I think it's true to it's keeping in the mindset of the characters. So I don't think it's breaking away, being someone who, when I go to the movies, like, for example, I just watched Frankenstein.
Yes.
And I used to teach that novel. I love the novel itself. And the 1994 version with Kenneth Branagh and Robert De Niro, as you might remember, I always felt
I didn't remember that it was that old, from 1994.
Neither did I until I looked it up. But that always, to me, was the truest to the text. And the recent version that just came out, Guillermo del Toro, am I saying del Toro?
Guillermo del Toro.
Thank you for that. Was doing such a good job staying true to the text, and then did what I just did, like wrote in a scene that wasn't there, and I was like, he's deviating from the text. But I had to do it, so I understand that agony that one has when you're trying to stay as true to the text and as true to the creator of the music. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
but sometimes you have to do that.
Well, that's why it's called artistic license.
Exactly. So that's like, so I guess, not to move too far away from your question, is my real goal is like, I hope to satisfy and honor the lovers of both the novel and the album, and the two greats that wrote both. That's really like my joy is if I can succeed with that, you know.
So that makes me think of three different questions. I'm
Okay.
going to try to ask all three of them.
Okay. All right.
Without getting sidetracked.
I know it's I'm.
No, it's just so fascinating.
It's
no,
hard
I mean it's like I could talk about these topics all day.
Yeah.
And that would not be for an interesting show, but
same.
So another theme of the book that I think Bowie played with his entire career was doublethink, and the concept where you could hold two competing versions of reality in your head at the same time. So just to sort of goose what I'm talking about, and I think you know, but just for you. So if you take one of Bowie's characters, the Thin White Duke or Ziggy, or even later characters that were not as easily identified as characters, like when he was the sort of avuncular, funny Bowie that would go on talk shows, right? I think that was a character. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're supposed to think that's the real David Bowie.
Right.
I don't think it was. Right? I mean, there's some of them in there, but it's like I think that was a character.
Like when they did the calling on, and you could request a song.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an example of that,
exactly.
Right?
So, so he would want to be treated like the character even when he's not performing. And in that respect, it's different than an actor playing a role. Robert De Niro, when he was acting in Frankenstein, was not expecting to be treated like Frankenstein's monster when he's walking down the street.
But Daniel Day-Lewis,
different story.
I had to, sorry.
Yeah, but this idea of, I know this is not real, but I want you to act like it's real. I want you to, in all ways, interact with Ziggy Stardust like Ziggy is an alien, messianic figure, right? This is not David Bowie. This is Ziggy, even though on some level, which I think has been also, we're talking about, we're not going to mention politicians' names, but it has also been a concept that's been sort of imported into politics these days, right? But it's in 1984 as doublethink.
100%. Yeah. I mean, again, I visit this novel every spring, and this sounds like an exaggeration, but every time I revisit it, I see something new. I understand more about it. And I think that's why, for lack of a better word, we call these books classics, because they really are. It doesn't matter whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, they make you re-examine, right? And again, I taught this during the pandemic. It's a different lens than teaching it in 2025. So it's going to be interesting, I think, this year in particular to read this again with the students, because I say this because I'm very, very transparent. One of the things like I admired from my faculty that I feel are a part of who I am is many of them would come in and they lectured for years these same topics. So they could basically barely look at notes, right? But one of the things that I have to do to put myself in the mindset is I read my assignments with the students during the time that I assign it, because I have to, just for that reason, like you said, like thinking of the concept of doublethink, right? Thinking of newspeak, right? That, when you're coming to the text, you're in a different place in your life every time you come to it. Does that make sense? And I hope I'm not deviating from your question.
No.
But does that make sense? Like, even when you listen to different Bowie albums, don't you feel like, depending where you are, if you listen to Low,
Well, this is perfect.
Because good.
It's particularly perfect pertaining to Diamond Dogs. Diamond Dogs, what became the soundtrack of my 2020 and 2021. I was listening to it obsessively. So during the lockdown, and then in 2020, and then in 2021, just in my personal life, there were other, sort of collapses that were happening, and it seemed like, how much, one of the things that dawned on me, or not dawned on me, it just a reaction to reading 1984 and 2025 is I was in my head, I was like, what did Orwell get right? What did he get wrong? Which is not what his intention was at all. But there was so much in the book that you could export export to today, right? It's like he's writing about today. So with Diamond Dogs, which was released in 1974, so much of it seemed like it was about 2021, and it seemed like it was about my life, right? Which of course it isn't, right?
Because you're bringing you to the table.
Yeah.
Right.
So, this is going to sound like woo, but along those lines, there are references in the album to the French Revolution. And an example of that is he makes references to the blood of les tricoteurs, which I'm sure anybody who speaks French, I'm pronouncing the word wrong. And for years, I thought he was referring to tree cutters, like lumberjacks. So that tells you how much I know. But so they were the stereotypical knitting women that would be depicted as sitting by the guillotines, like getting sort of shallow entertainment from watching the heads roll, literally. And in my sort of self mythology, I thought of the tricotta as the women that were at the forefront of the bread riots that led to the French Revolution, and that they really became instruments of one political faction superseding another political faction, and they didn't really get anything, right? So they had sort of a core legitimate concern, hunger, and at the end, the only thing that they were fed with was the blood of people that they hated, and it seemed like, that was deliberate. It seemed like an album that ends with "We Want You, Big Brother" is sort of inviting the specter of an unfulfilled mass desire.
Yeah, well, the album starts with "This ain't rock and roll, this is genocide."
Yeah.
I mean, I again, coming back to this idea that, you mentioned earlier, I would say the creation and then the extinction, if you will. I mean, the character's never really extinct, but like, let's, blow it up, right? Let's continue to blow it up. I wonder, I always wonder about this. And again, because I spend so much time in class looking at Bowie's quest, desire to achieve immortality, I wonder often, even though he appears to be searching, got to keep searching. I can't help myself. It's always going to be about a song, for being on top all of the time. And we know this, we know that Let's Dance is one of those times where that's it. Like Gary Newman, all new wave, they stole from me, so I'm blowing it up and I'm doing this, you know what I mean? And I wonder what his audience expectations were. Right. I always wonder about that. Like, how intelligent did he think his audience was or was not,
Well, I this is again.
What do you think? Yeah.
It seems to me like, I say this about Bowie, he gave the audience what they didn't want, right? And so, I was 8 when Low came out. I was not listening to David Bowie when I was 8.
Yeah.
But I have to imagine, if you're all excited by Young Americans and Golden Years and Stay and Fame, and then you buy Low, right? And you're hearing it for the first time, you have to be thinking, what is this?
I was just gonna say, my great friend Eric Taros, who interviewed Earl Slick at Berklee for my class, because I had already interviewed Earl in another one of my classes, professional development. So I didn't want Earl to be bored. Yeah. So I brought in Eric Taros, who who worked on the film 8 days a week. He takes, I think I mentioned this to you before, he takes audio footage and links it to the original film footage. And that's what he does. And I know there's a technical term for that. What would it be? It's escaping me. But anyway, he spoke to me about being a fan and buying Diamond Dogs and listening to the album. And then, at the end of the first side, that bra, 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 and he thought the record skipped and he was mad. He was like, my record is skipped. Hearing him tell that story is so wonderful. But he said the first time he played that album, he was just like, what is this?
Yeah, right.
So
over and over again, right? I mean, if you think Young Americans was so different than like the glam albums, right? Tin Machine was so different than the 80s stuff. Let's Dance, there are Bowie fans that resent him for Let's Dance, right? I mean, not new Bowie fans because it all exists together.
Yeah.
But the people who liked, Scary Monsters, some people didn't like Let's Dance because. But what does he do? He's constantly. But this, I think, also gets to the what you're saying about him wanting to be on top because he wants to better him. He wants to best himself.
Yeah, I think he's trying to outdo himself. Like, what can I do now? What can I create?
It's almost like, would I still be a star if I was starting from new with this material, or are people just buying it because of the last thing?
And what's interesting that you brought up the last time that we chatted was you asked me about students. And for many, the fact that they start with Black Star, it blows our minds, right? But isn't it interesting to think of like out of chronology now, of course, they are listening to...
There is no sequence.
Right, but the records do stand alone. And again, not to sound like, the old dinosaur that I am. So I would say very few artists are doing this now where, an album is a story and a theatrical production. And of course, that's like if you have the money to do that. But I think if you do, an artist that's doing that is Lady Gaga. She is, like, you look at the Mayhem Ball and, I can think of Glass Spider Tour. You know what I'm saying? And but albums that tell a story and that stand alone, to me, Diamond Dogs is one of the greatest examples of that. And even Station to Station, the way that album starts and the way that album ends, like we don't have that as much now. What do you think? I mean,
well, I mean, you're the musician and you're the the literal music professor. I'm not, but it seems to me that a lot of music is made for shuffle. Right, and it seems like when I talk to newer musicians, they're churning out singles. Right, and I actually, there's a recurring guest on my show who's not a famous musician. His name is Mark Lowe, who makes albums, and he's heavily influenced by Bowie, but I don't, his albums are not, they're not products for mass consumption. And I think a lot of the pursuit of, a hit is really sort of divorced from any kind of context. Like, does the thing stand alone? That's my observation, but I might be wrong.
Yeah. That's what I tried to do in my new project. We start with a song called Inaugural, and then the rest. But I mean, again, that's, for me, I love the idea of the album sitting beside a novella or a short story, if you will, or a novel, depending on, they all tell a story. There's a story in there, I hope, right? And like you said, you suggested maybe it's a different story for you than it is for me. You know what I'm saying? Like with Bowie, what was his goal? But even, again, I know that, Day in, Day out gets a lot of heat, right? That Never Let Me Down, that whole period. But you listen to that album and it's an album too.
Right. Yeah. And Bowie was, and this is very evident in Diamond Dogs, it's almost called 1984. Less so in something like Never Let Me Down, where the sequence of the songs is very intentional.
Yeah, very. And that's how it challenged me when I started this project. it was put forth to me, this is going to be a huge undertaking. Why don't you just isolate 5 songs? And I said, okay. And as I dug deeper into the project, I felt it would be neglectful and not true to the vision to leave anything out. So the album is woven into the text.
Yeah, right.
If you will.
So I'm just pausing because there's 2 things I want to ask. Let me ask this. We were just talking about the sequence. Why do you think he ended Diamond Dogs? He ends it with the chant of the ever-circling skeletal family.
Yeah.
But the last full song that sounds like a song is Big Brother. Why do you think he ends with Big Brother?
That's a great question. And if we go to the end of the novel, right? The very last line. He had won the victory over himself. He loved Big Brother.
Yeah. What a crushing line, isn't it?
Well, it is. And I always ask the students, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Is there any hope left, or is there no hope? And I'm always actually reminded of, and I bet you think of this too, A Clockwork Orange, very much so, like Anthony Burgess just took it another step further, right? Do you think, who also influenced Bowie? As we know.
Yeah, well, that's like, I don't even want to go down that road because it's like a whole other conversation.
We'll save that for another conversation. Yeah.
I do want to ask about what comes after that line, which is, I told you the first time and the only other time I read the whole book might have been in 1984. So it was a long time ago. I either completely forgot or I never read the appendix. And so let me ask you 2 things. The one is, do you think that it is important to read the appendix, or is it really like an appendix of most other books where it's not, you don't really
I think it's useful.
Yeah.
I don't require my students to.
Yeah.
It's useful.
Yeah.
But you have me thinking now. Always up for trying new things,
Well, I'm not, this is not my original observation, but I completely forgot. I probably didn't read it, right? Back in 1984, right?
You probably patted yourself on the back for finishing, just because it's not an easy read, even though the language isn't difficult. The reason why I say it's not an easy read, I'm sure, you may agree, is because you can't just blitz through it. You really have to because it plays with your mind.
Yes.
Don't you think?
Oh yeah. Now I was going, when I was 15, right? I don't remember how I read it, but this summer when I read it over again, I would reread parts, and then I'd reach one part in the book and I'd go back to an earlier part to really sort of, there's things that I missed or I didn't fully appreciate. And that's not unique to this book, but it, like you're saying, that on a sentence by sentence basis, the language isn't complex. But I agree with that. So here's the thing, and it's not my original observation. The appendix is written as if the events of the book took place in the past, and that whoever's writing this is from a world that got beyond this.
Right, which means, I know where you're going, if you don't mind me jumping in, is that there is hope.
Yes.
Where if you stop at the end,
there's no
you're,
hope.
Right.
Which also gets to the immortality part, because O'Brien, again, the main antagonist, at one point, and this, again, I had no recollection of this from the original reading. He says, I'm not going to quote it exactly, I don't have it committed to memory, but he says to Winston, I could see in your eyes that I look old and haggard, or something like that. And he references how, even though he's in the ruling class of this world, he doesn't really have a personal ambition for wealth or for, and I think this is where, Orwell got this kind of wrong, because the totalitarian impulse is not monkish, right? I mean, it's like, but anyway, so O'Brien was basically saying, as an individual, I am I'm dying. I am not an individual. I'm part of the party.
Right.
And the
Right.
party is immortal. And everything that they're trying to do with manipulating history and changing language, and ultimately, I mean, you mentioned sex, right? So that they're trying to, the anti-sex league, in the view of this totalitarian culture, sex brings too much of a rebellious spirit into humanity, and they're trying to actually eliminate the pleasurable aspect of sex, right, from humanity, in order for the party to be immortal, right? The collective would be immortal, and in a way, this gets back to my question about pride or hubris, right? Because it's like our work is our immortality. And for Bowie, I don't think that he pretended like he would literally live forever, but it's like he wanted what's going to live forever is the work, the memory. He elevates to this. I mean, if he was still around today, he would see himself as a cultural icon, right? I mean, it's not like, George Harrison, beautiful musician, right? Wonderful artist. He's not, you don't see George Harrison's face every third block when you're walking down the street, right? Or the lightning bolt,
I think you hit it without saying it. What's most important in the novel, and what is also, I feel, one of the central themes for Bowie is control. Control over your legacy. Control over what you put out and to the party. Control over your mind. Control over your body. 2025.
Yes.
Control over your mind, control over your body. I'm sorry, there's too many similarities. You know what I'm saying? It's eerie, not in a good way.
Not in a good way. I'll tell you something that makes me think of is that Diamond Dogs is Bowie famously uses the cut-up technique, which is literally he's cutting lines. He got it from William S. Burroughs, right? He's cutting lines and rearranging them. And I think, I'm not an expert on William S. Burroughs, I think he really would sort of randomize that. And Bowie sort of admitted, well, you could change it a little bit, right? So he wanted to have control over the random effect.
I would agree to that.
So we covered most of what I wanted to cover. Even though I could keep talking, but there's one thing I sort of wanted to end on, which is that Diamond Dogs is not the last time 1984 is referenced in a Bowie album or song. And you might think of another example, but what I'm specifically thinking of is on Black Star, there's this song called Girl Loves Me that partially uses you mentioned A Clockwork Orange, right? It partially uses the fictional language from that novel, but there's also a line in it, I'm sitting in the chestnut tree, which I had forgotten. So what is it, and what is the chestnut tree?
My interpretation of that has always just been this maudlin feeling, and I'm thinking, and it comes up in the novel twice at least, if not three times. I want to say twice, right?
Well, the chestnut tree is the name of a bar that it has that feeling that you're describing.
That maudlin, and it ends. It's the last location. Right. Which of course is true to the script as well. I have that there. Is it the unknowing, the uncertainty of what's next for Bowie and for, I wouldn't say for Julia and Winston, because I think they know what's next, but maybe for the reader? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, so in the novel, you're right. It's the last location. And Winston, we have seen Winston go through the ringer, right? So the protagonist of the novel has been tortured, he's been broken. That line that you read, it ends when he's been, his victory over himself, right? He's been broken. He's been completely deconstructed he's no longer an individual. But also we at some point we learn that everything that happens in the book, he's being monitored. And even when he thinks he's getting away with something, he's being watched all the time. And the circumstances that bring him to the end of the book were manipulated by this completely totalitarian society. But after he's broken, he's kind of taken off the leash, so he could go to this bar and sit there and drink gin, right? And he's watching like the television, and because he at this point he sort of follows the party line, right? So there's news about the war, and he gets worried when the newscaster suggests that there's some drama, and then he's relieved when the story turns out to be one of victory. But by this point the reader knows that the newscaster is kind of making this up, right? So it's again, like the extent to which the parallels in where we are today are unmistakable. But so there's a kind of a freedom, but the other thing that he knows is that or at least we know, is that at some point he's going to get shot in the back of the head, right? So Bowie, is dying. So he has a kind of a freedom, but he knows that this is going to end. And so he's sitting in the chestnut tree. The maudlin feeling is, he's near the end. He has a kind of a freedom, but he can operate within limits.
But I think he was rallying against that, right? Because he still had plans of creation. So I think, and again, I could be wrong. I will admit, I think there was like an internal struggle, of acceptance, and just like we all will have, I'm sure I will have that too, because there was so much he still wanted to do. So was some of that like resolution, saying like I'm in the chestnut tree, or I don't know. I'm you're making me think.
Again, it's like we're veering into Black Star instead of Diamond Toes.
I know, it's hard to not do this.
Do you think if he was able to make another album after Black Star, which you just alluded to, he wanted to do, that we would think of Black Star differently?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I never thought of this parallel, though, between Black Star being the last album and the ending of 1984. So my brain is in hyperspeed right now, just thinking about that, Oh, that's heavy.
Well, we'll leave this show with something for you to think about.
Yeah,
right?
And I guess I would just say too to stay tuned because we're going to be working this spring at Berklee on the creation of bringing to life, in some part, the production of 1984, the musical, as inspired from Bowie's Diamond Dogs. So in a new works development course. And I have to share with you that some of my former Bowie students have signed up for this new works development course. My colleague, Jonathan Gallegos, is going to be helping me bring the baby to life.
Gretchen, will you come back when that's ready?
Absolutely. Great. I would love to, and I'll
Great.
have more to show you.
Wonderful. Gretchen Shae, thank you so much. This has been terrific. And like I said, we could keep talking all night. It's getting dark.
I know, right? 100%. I know.
So
and it's funny,
be continued.
Because we're going to be, we're recording a couple of new songs today, just because Tuesdays is my work from home day, I told you. So we had a song we've been playing live and we haven't recorded it, and it's called The Following. Yeah. Interesting enough. So
that's We Are Proles?
Yeah. And it was like one of those songs that I just wrote, and then I said, I don't know if this is done or, whatever. And they were like, no, it's done. So we're recording it today.
Oh, Proles. It's a word from the book, 1984, right?
Yeah. Because bringing it back to the ending, there's one line in the novel that says, if there is any hope, it lies with the Proles.
Yeah. and you are Proles, and there is a lot of hope.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's music to my ears.
Gretchen Shae, thank you.
Thank you.